want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us today. The world of Zoom, in spite of the fact that we don't have to travel to meetings anymore, has not made life a whole lot less busy. So really appreciate it. And today it's an LBS virtual delivery in community-based agencies. Where do we go from here? Now, if you're not from a community-based agency, you're still very welcome. We just thought probably these are conversations that most of our community-based agencies will be having. So let's see. Sarah, I'm trying to advance my slide, but it doesn't seem to want to. Oh, there we go. All right, so this is a business plan deliverable that is shared amongst 4 organizations. So the College Sector Committee / ACE Online, and Barb Glass is here today with us. Contact North, and Sarah Stalker is here helping us with all things technical and also providing insight into the topic at hand. Quill Learning Network, and Heather Robinette is here today representing Quill. And Literacy Link South Central, and that's the organization that I work for, and I'm Tamara Cottery. So let's see. So we framed today's presentation as more of a discussion, and the reason for that is because we really wanted to hear from you. Our deliverable is related to the pandemic and the fact that Ontario's literacy and basic skills programs were forced to go online in a real hurry. It's not to say that many of you didn't already have some kind of an online connection, but let's face it, the pandemic changed everything. And our programs did an amazing job under very, very challenging circumstances. So all of that is good news, and you have much to congratulate yourselves for. But I came across an article, and the article is actually sourced at the bottom of this screen. And it said, it really caught my attention, that well-planned online learning experiences are meaningfully different from courses offered online in response to a crisis or disaster. So like I said, this sentence really stuck in my mind. And I thought, yeah, I think that pretty much adequately describes what's happening in a lot of LBS programs across Ontario. And what the article does is it draws a real distinction between emergency remote teaching and online learning. So there's a reference in this article to a book that you might want to check out. I certainly plan to, and it's called Learning Online: What Research Tells Us About Whether, How, and When. Because it seems to me that a lot of programs have made a significant investment in time in moving their programming online. But what do we do now that, when offering face-to-face is becoming very much a possibility? So just a few other snippets from this article. Effective online education requires an investment in an ecosystem of learner supports, which take time to identify and build. So they liken this to, say you're at a university and people are delivering a lecture. Well, sure, that's where a lot of the information is coming from, but the university itself has a host of other supports that learners can tap into in order to be able to be successful in their learning. And we just haven't had time to develop all of those other kinds of supports. And in all honesty, I can't even begin to tell you what they all are. So this article breaks it down, I think, into 9 different areas. And we're not suggesting that LBS agencies, particularly community-based, should, liken themselves to a university. Obviously, we're not funded anywhere near to the same extent, but we do want to think very carefully about where and how we move into distance sort of delivery, or how much of that you hang on to. So because of this particular article, we thought, the group of 4 organizations that I mentioned earlier, that we would deliver a series of 3 webinars. And the goal is to assist LBS programs in thinking critically about the role of online learning, given the nature of their clients, their resources, their in-house expertise, and the rest of the LBS landscape. Probably everybody, except for our participant who is brand new in her executive director role as of the 14th of June, you've all participated in literacy service planning. And as a regional network, that is what we do, right? And we want to make sure that we're covering the greatest number of geographical areas, but as well as learner client groups, etc. So, really thinking about who else is out there in the LBS landscape. And I see several of our e-channel providers have joined us this morning, which is great because they are part of that landscape. And thinking about how to coordinate our very limited resources is important. So why a focus on community-based programs today? Well, first of all, CLO was having its webinar, which was just a really, really good segue. So we thought, yep, let's follow up on that conversation where some organizations who have made some extraordinary progress in moving online to have a conversation about what does it mean to really think strategically about what your organization is going to do and how are you going to provide evidence of that strategic thinking. And the ministry hasn't come to me and said, hey, Tamara, you should really make sure that every program is doing this. I'm just trying to think about what is good practice. What would I do if I were running a program?
We wanted those lawn chairs in.
So, Joe, I think your mic is, maybe I can mute you. That's what I'll do. Okay. Lawn chairs are cool, but not really what we're doing today. So I had fun putting together this slide because, you guys all know this story very well. You don't have all these other big departments to help you make these kinds of determinations or support you with research that can help you make the decisions. So you don't have tech support, I'm assuming. You don't have a research and development arm, and you don't have, if you do strategic planning, you probably do it once every 3 to 5 years and you have to get funding from somewhere else in order to do it. So these are some of the things that we probably should be considering, though, as we move ahead into a non-pandemic time and with some experience in online delivery under your belt. Okay, so I promised you that this would be a discussion. So to launch this particular part of the webinar, we have a poll that Sarah has just put up there. So I'd love it if you guys would take a second and participate in this poll. So what percentage of learners would you like to re-engage in person rather than remotely? Well, I love that we can see how many people have voted. That takes the guesswork right out of it. So,
yeah, okay. Most people have voted.
And I know there's some support orgs on the call who just may not find this question relevant for them. So, okay, well, that's interesting to see. So let's see, 9 programs are saying 50%, 3 are saying 75%, and 8 are saying more than 75%. So that's an interesting thing to note. I was on a call last week with a couple of programs from Toronto area, and they were thinking they had a different sort of perspective on this. So I'm kind of thrilled, though, to see that so many people are thinking of moving back primarily face-to-face. So just as a little spoiler, one of the things our committee has been thinking about is whether we could bring in a quote-unquote expert in face-to-face delivery versus online delivery. There have to be people in the province, probably working within universities, who have studied this at length. And that's the kind of research that we don't really ever get our hands on. It doesn't often trickle down to the front lines. So if we could find somebody to come in and share some of that information, we wondered if that would be helpful. So hang on to that idea or give it some thought as we continue. Does anybody have any comments that you want to share about why you chose the percentage that you did? Is your organization chomping at the bit to go back to face-to-face delivery? I see, Heather, you've got your hand up, so please go ahead.
Thanks. So I chose 50% because we do have, we want to have our learners back and we love being in the same space with them. But what we found with a lot of our online delivery is that we've been able to support learners where in more rural areas where their transportation would have been a barrier, and that we also have been able to support learners that aren't as comfortable in face-to-face settings. So and now actually through online might be interested in transitioning into the centers once we're doing face-to-face service again. So I think if we can have half of them, our learners, engaged online, that is either a great transition into the center or a way to serve people that otherwise were not being as well served prior.
I love that idea of transitioning, like this, increasingly we're seeing individuals who have mental health challenges, anxiety. I mean, geographically, there can be a barrier for sure. But if people become comfortable in an online environment, then maybe that next step is for people to, is for people to start attending face-to-face. I see Joanne has just put in the chat, they got torrential rain, and that's where the lawn chair comment came from. That's a hoot. Kathy, would you like to share?
I think that we've had some great success with online learning, but more one-on-one as opposed to groups. And as a result, it's very resource intensive. And so maintaining a high proportion of people with one-on-one support online with the current resources is impossible. So trying to think about a mix of kind of groups in person and that online one-on-one support that Heather mentioned for people that can't make it in or aren't likely to attend in a group.
Great. Thank you for sharing. So it's best for me, everybody, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand, because that puts you right up to the very top of my queue. I can't see everybody at the same time. So thanks so much, everybody, for doing that. Okay, so our next question. What types of learners and levels of learners did you lose during the pandemic, and what did they need that you couldn't provide? I've heard different things from our local program. Some have estimated that they lost contact with as high as 40% of the learners that they were working with pre-pandemic. Does anybody want to share here? Because I'd be shocked if you didn't lose at least some learners. Heather?
I don't want to be the only person talking, but this is something I'm really excited about because we've had a lot of, it was a wonderful learning experience for our agency. So we did lose either folks that were not as comfortable, some folks that were not as comfortable with digital literacy, also people who, we had devices that we could lend out, like computers and such, but people who were in a situation where having the internet was not something that they would have for a long period of time or want for a long period of time. We were very dubious about getting people to sign up for an internet service if it wasn't something that we could help them perpetuate after this was over and put them in a bad financial situation. So that was an area. We did continue to engage with people a lot. We had like kind of check-in conversations that could be done online or phoned in, a coffee chat that we did weekly. So even though our learners weren't coming into the center, we didn't lose them. They're still engaged and they're still working through stuff. Sometimes we were giving paper pamphlets on like how to log on to something. So people who were comfortable with that format could step by step go through and log into a meeting with us. But we did lose people, I would say particularly 50 plus, who weren't regularly, like age 50 plus, who weren't very comfortable with using online services.
Absolutely, thank you for that. Wendy.
Hi everyone, we lost a lot, especially our lower level learners with no internet, no digital hardware, no access and no supports on the other end. We lost all of the women in our Homeward Bound program because of childcare and lockdowns. Our clients that were on like ODSP clients, we lost them because as being one of the most vulnerable populations, they went right immediately into lockdown. So we did come up with a variety of ways to still reach out. We carried a small group over a while. But yeah, we lost quite a few because of it.
Wow, yeah, those extenuating circumstances like the childcare. I mean, there were just so many things, like a ripple effect that happened.
Yeah.
And Wendy,
well,
you're from driving, yeah, okay.
Yeah, Dryden being so small, like we just everything just shut right down. It was like a ghost town.
Yes.
So,
Well, thank you for sharing. Angela.
Hi. Yeah, I won't repeat the things that others have said because I can relate to those for our learners as well. One of the ones that quite a few students commented on is needing a learning environment with other people who are also focusing and studying in order to engage their own discipline to learn. They just really needed that learning community, and even just the casual contact with teachers if they were working independently, but having teachers circulating where they could just easily ask a question. Many folks just didn't even want to try the online learning. They just felt they wouldn't get that kind of support.
It's interesting that you raised the learning community. I think that's one of the pieces that article that prompted me to think about this deliverable in the first place was talking about. You know, like it's not just a matter of moving information online. A lot of people need a lot more than that to stay engaged.
Yeah, true.
Okay, so I'm just checking the chat here. Kathy said we lost women looking after their kids. Better attendance for adults when school was in person. I can imagine that. And Erin said we lost learners that have children at home and learners with low digital skills that weren't comfortable with remote learning. And we lost learners who needed to focus more on finding or maintaining employment. Thank you for that. And Jeanette said we lost learners who weren't comfortable with low digital skills, but some of our learners with children preferred online learning. Yep. Yeah, it really speaks to the variability of our field. And yet I find that in most communities where there's more than one provider of LBS, it's typically the community-based program that works with people who are at lower levels. Is that the same way? That's my assumption, but is that true? We tend to work with the most vulnerable in our communities, I think. Okay, so somebody has joined and they can't hear anything. So Sarah, I'm going to ask you maybe to work with January.
Yeah, I will. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Ontario Works was wonderful about assisting their clients in our STU class. Okay, I think I need to, what's STU stand for? But even with that effort to get laptops and internet set up for them, people dropped off as they lost the motivation to be online. Yeah, you know, I think I noticed it even amongst our colleagues, right? Like the online, you know, environment sort of day after day after day is tough. Really missed the class support. They could access at any time. When online, they had designated days and times with me, which didn't work for all. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you follow the bridges out of poverty philosophy, but the tyranny of the moment, you know, some people really do need that help, you know, wherever they're at, right? As opposed to having to say Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. See, Stephanie is joining us. Okay. So some people have already touched on this, but I mean, life continued and people had to go out and try to generate activity. So does anybody want to share who you were successful in retaining and attracting? Because some people found completely new markets that maybe they hadn't tapped into before. Did anybody have an experience where they actually found new clients or, you know, developed new partnerships as a result of having to be creative during the pandemic?
Tamara, I did hear several programs say that they attracted more seniors, or actually the seniors found their way to them as they sought to engage online more, whether it be with family and friends or just to access health information that was so critical during this pandemic. That was one definite new group that I heard about. And then the general need that people had for to upgrade their digital skills of all age groups so they could know what was happening with vaccines or lockdown requirements or a whole variety of, and more importantly, accessing social services that were so especially at the beginning of the pandemic, that were so hidden and hard to find because of, not on purpose, but because they were locked down. Like, how do you find the services that you need? I heard a lot about those ones. Thanks.
Thanks, Joe. I mean, certainly the pandemic shone a real spotlight on the digital divide. You know, and I found that literacy was being talked about, digital literacy, in circles where I don't think it had ever been talked about before. So, you know, it's interesting though, because oftentimes a lot of other groups would come forward and go, oh, there's something, you know, we need to do something about that. But with LBS having a relatively low profile, it was almost like we had to continue reminding them, saying, you know what, there are adult education or adult literacy programs here that can and, you know, are funded to provide digital literacy support. Angela, I think your hand was up next.
Yes, we held on to, and some of the students who thrived were people who had a lot of anxiety, for whom coming into the group setting of our learning center, it caused them anxiety. And so, you know, their attendance would be a little bit irregular. Those folks really actually are attending classes really steadily and making good progress. Also, people who had long commutes, even though we're in an urban center, it can still take a long time to get across the city. And so those folks really appreciated just being able to actually roll out of bed and show up for class.
Yeah, and whatever they were wearing.
Actually.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And Heather.
Yeah, speaking on behalf of some of the programs from the Quill region, a lot reported seeing an increase in their younger population of learners who are comfortable with the digital skills and maybe less comfortable with, you know, being on site and in person. So they indicated that there was an increase in that population, and also noted that a lot of them were also on the goal path to post-secondary education as well. So that's just an observation from the Quill region. I see in the chat, just pointing to the chat for you, that Andrea Dickinson also indicated that programs in her area said they reached more youth. And I'll just maybe catch you up on the chat. Heather Barker indicated that they were able to launch several joint programs with partners that they wouldn't have been able to do with in-person learning. And Kathy Kennedy said people who may have had community living support and were looking for skills for employment or attendance at college, CICE programs. And the worker support was helpful for organizing participation.
Excellent, thank you. So again, a couple of things there that speak to that community of support. And Heather, I'd be interested in hearing who those, well, maybe not who that you want to share, but I'd love to know a little bit more about the things that you launched that you wouldn't have been able to do with in-person learning.
Sure. So we did we had essential skills live seminars with one of our employment services partners. So we were able to do information sessions on the essential skills for employment and talk about how that support can happen both through LBS and through ES and why they're essential. And it was great because we were able to reach both of our clients, basically our client sector, which for us was great as LBS because that kind of increased visibility of us and the importance of our agencies working together. We also did a soft skills solutions program that was run with PELC, the Learning Center. So that was good for our capacity because we were able to have an instructor from both locations facilitating, which made the program a lot more diverse. And we were able to serve our clients in our own areas, but have instructors from both places facilitating at the same time. So just basically programs like that where location would have made it not possible for us to bring our clients together in the same way at the same time, but we were able to capitalize on the expertise and resources with staff from both of our agencies and serve a larger client base.
Excellent, thank you. I did hear from some of our local employment service providers that they were having much more success with youth online. So that's kind of interesting. I think that ripple effect was maybe felt throughout Employment Ontario. And several of our local employment services reached out to LBS and did develop those partnerships around primarily soft skills. So that's interesting. All right, thank you. Anybody else want to weigh in on who you managed to retain and or attract? Okay. All right, this is where we get into some of the strategy. What are some of the limitations that your organization will face if you continue to offer remote learning in addition to face-to-face moving forward? Obviously, I'm sure everybody has already given this some thought, but can you just share what you think? Somebody raised the word or used the word capacity. So certainly I think about capacity when it comes to LBS delivery. In some ways, it's almost like you're maintaining two different types of offerings, but unless something radical has changed, I don't think there's a lot more money flowing into LBS to recognize that.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to raise my hand.
Well, I think that there's a button at the bottom, but you don't need to do that, Nicole. Please go ahead.
Okay, sorry. So we have had some discussions about this because right now when we're doing our in-class instruction traditionally, it was 9 till 2:30. When we moved online, we found that we didn't have much success with joint classes. And as we polled our learners, they very much wanted just one-on-one time. So we started to divide up our time slots. So, next thing you knew, you were online for 8 hours a day, trying to provide that support. And that's not sustainable at the same time as having learners hopefully in class with us in September. So we're still juggling ideas. I'm based in Aylmer and Helen is based in St. Thomas. So we've toyed with things like one of us becomes online support, in the morning, and the other covers the afternoon, and then you only have in-class portions on the opposite. We're not overly excited by that idea. Not because we haven't learned a lot about how to provide service online, but we just find like the people that have said to us they would like to remain online are more of our hesitant learners, and it's just easier for them to avoid work and making progress when they're not with us in person. So in our particular classrooms, we feel like the requests to remain online are more avoidance instead of a true desire to actually learn online.
That kind of just raised something in my mind. I think prior to the pandemic, our local Ontario Works offices, where a lot of LBS clients would come from, they weren't necessarily excited about online learning as an option for just, I think, the same reasons that you just expressed, Nicole. So I'm kind of curious to see how or if that's going to change moving forward. Wendy, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to comment that, as community-based agencies, we've always tried to offer a variety of learning methods using different platforms so that, we're also using the clients or the learners' learning preference styles. So we've always offered different learning options, for blended learning, one-on-one, group learning. I think that, for the last few years, we've been involved in some outreach programming, a little bit more mobile, but not big numbers, just small. And I think that virtual learning for us here is another tool in our toolbox. And now we can offer this for this client if that's what their needs are. And we need to know what our community needs. And some people would prefer online. Some people would prefer face-to-face. It's about that needs analysis. And if you have the capacity to do it, that's great. But I just think that we've always provided a variety of methods using a variety of platforms. And this is another method and another platform. So we really need to know what our clients' needs are in order for us to, if we're going to continue in that way. I don't think there should be one option. There should always be lots of choices for our learners.
You've kind of caused me to think about this in a different way, Wendy, and I appreciate that. So, you know, instead of thinking, well, is it online or is it face-to-face? I mean, I love what you're saying, which is really more of a universal design approach, sort of like what suits the needs of the learners. And this is another tool in your toolbox. I think that's a really neat way of thinking about it. Thank you. Anybody else have anything that you want to share related to capacity, limitations? Angela.
Sorry, had to unmute there. Yeah, I can really relate to the comments about wanting to serve our learners in their preferred style, and that's always been a goal for us. But also, as the first person who shared says, like, there's really just, for us anyway, there's just not enough hours in the day for staff to be able to offer in-person and remote. Right now, our remote learning is happening during our in-person time slots. We're using the exact same times of the day. And you know, really without hiring more staff, I don't know how we would do it. And so that would require an increase, you know, in funding. How reasonable is that to hope for? You know, it also occurs to me that maybe as community programs, we divide and conquer, right? Some specialize more in the online, while some offer the in-person within a similar geographic area. One of the blessings and beauties of community-based program is, I think, as a, you know, in general, we really go to the learner and we try to problem solve what are the barriers that individual has for getting to the education that they're looking for. My program is part of Algonquin College's academic upgrading program. So I have a lot of restrictions in terms of, you know, the format I have to fit to, but because my program is a little satellite classroom, we offer a lot more individual support for learners. So, you know, we help move those roadblocks out of the way. So, you know, my concern is that if we made all of our referrals for online learning to, say, an ACE distance program, would they get that? And not that ACE distance isn't doing a wonderful job, they really are. But I don't know that they have the capacity to do the kind of hand-holding that is built into my role. My role provides that hand-holding to get people online and successful. So I think that referring them out to resources that currently exist, I'm going to lose those most vulnerable learners are going to lose out. So without more funding, I don't know what the answer is.
You've got me thinking. Sorry, I have to build in time for these cogs in my noodle to spin. A couple things about what you just said, Angela. One is the connection back to literacy service planning, right? Do we all have to be doing the same things for the same people? No, you don't. And so where you're part of a community where there are multiple agencies, I think this is a good topic to be addressing. I haven't heard of any additional money coming to LBS. We're ever hopeful, are we not? But no, I haven't heard of anything there. And also the transitioning piece, right? I mean, already we know, and I know some of our e-channel partners are on today and can probably speak to this a lot better than I can. But I would say there was more blended learning going on pre-pandemic than pure online learning. So, you know, there's always been a space for the face-to-face delivery and working with e-channel, for example. But what I picked up from your comments there, Angela, was more along the lines of potentially transitioning more vulnerable learners, you know, getting them familiar with the technology, the online learning environment, and then potentially they would be able to take advantage of more of the e-channel offerings. And I see a little bit of nodding. Did I paraphrase that okay?
Yeah, that's true. I think there needs to be somebody in a role that's designated to help people move into comfort with online learning environments, and that continues to provide that support that we would if they were coming into the classroom. You know how you're always on the lookout for, are they hungry? Have they slept? What else is going on in their life? That still needs to be built in for the people that we're directing towards online learning so that they can continue to make progress.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, and I think those are very real issues, right? How are you going to resource the different strategies that, need to be addressed? Because there will be hopefully much excitement about a return to face-to-face. But obviously there's already some skin in the game when it comes to, working with learners online that you don't want to lose. So, okay.
I just have a question. With the YWCA program, quite often we'll try to run supplemental programs to help us with our numbers. So we might run financial literacy or an offset computer class or something like that. So another challenge we're going to have moving forward is time constraints, because again, we used to have our in-person training and then we would offer these, kind of one-off courses in the afternoons when we weren't typically teaching. So if we're trying to adapt, and still provide online and in person, we've now lost that time to offer these supplementary courses because there's just two of us, right? We don't have, we've also been trying to figure out how we can continue to offer, a 1 or 2 week course here or there on different topics that the community is interested in receiving.
Thanks, Nicole. That absolutely is a planning issue. I know we're not supposed to use the word boutique, but I still think of them that way. But almost like there are 3 different pathways, right? Like online, face-to-face, and then the standalone programs. So it's a lot to factor in when there isn't, to my knowledge, going to be any, new money coming to LBS programs.
It really is all. So it really is all about capacity.
I'm glad that these things are coming up because as we continue through here, there will be, I'm wondering what, if anything, our committee can do to support you as community-based and other LBS providers in terms of looking at that capacity, right? So, okay. So we have touched on this a little bit already, but will your staffing model be able to accommodate blended learning on a more permanent basis? So Nicole, I think that's what you were just speaking to. Does anybody have anything else they want to add here? Have you changed your staffing model in ways over the last 1.5 years because of the pandemic? I've heard some practitioners say that they struggle because they're never offline. Like they feel like they're just available 24/7 to learners. You might be texting them, might be, emailing them, setting up those Zoom meetings. It used to be more of a 9 to 4, and now it's sort of a 9 till whenever. Nicole, I saw a thumbs up from you, I think. So has that been an experience that some of either yourself or people within your program have had?
Part of what we were able to receive work-related cell phones once the pandemic hit, because it became necessary to text and call our learners a lot more often. Obviously, we didn't want to use our personal phones for that. So with that came, the challenge that people will text or call at any time, even if you try to establish barriers. It's hard to ignore a text, or you see something come across and you're like, oh, that'd be quick and easy to just answer. I did have a few people who would start shift work, so they would be on a 2-week cycle. So next thing I knew, I'd be helping them, when they're on the daytime shift, helping them in the evenings. And honestly, that's more a challenge for me than for them, right? If they choose to text and I reinforce that behavior by responding, I only have myself to blame. But I found barriers have fallen for sure, as far as, I feel like I'm available quite often. And especially if it's people that you struggle to get in contact with, you really want to pounce when they finally do reach out to you, even if it's Friday at 7. So again, I think that's more lessons and things for me to learn at my end. How do I want to manage that moving forward? And I think Helen would say the same thing.
It also speaks though from a planning perspective, if you're going to maintain that kind of interaction, then, stress on staff needs to be a consideration. Maybe there are training opportunities or needs there that would not have existed before the pandemic. And so I'm thinking through, like, if I were writing a plan, what kinds of things would I take into account? Joe, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I definitely agree with what you just said about the blend, protecting your staff time. But my point was a little different in that I've been really impressed, I guess not surprised, because community-based programs are always so innovative in how they approach things. But just hearing from some of the programs how the staff so readily adapted to online. Some already were doing extensive digital and blended learning, but some staff were not, and were not necessarily comfortable. So I think that's an issue too, is keeping up skills in that area. For example, I heard one program was telling me how they did they decided Zoom was their platform, the go-to platform with learners, and none of us were really familiar with it. March 2020, it was kind of brand new. So they would kind of do team teaching with the staff, and they would set aside every second day, 20 minutes or something, and each staff person, they just had a small staff, like 4, and some volunteers, and they would take turns on how they, I'm going to show you how to use the raise hand function, for example, or and teach their colleagues. And, that way you really learn when you're the teacher of that class, even when you may not know a lot about it to begin with. So some really creative solutions about using these new technologies and really embedding it, not just, watching a video and going away and not really implementing it, and then also some who are, because a lot of these tools have, say Zoom or whatever it may be, have excellent tools online, right on their website. Like I noticed Zoom has these 1-minute videos on all kinds of aspects of Zoom. So just using those tools that the platforms themselves provide, or GCF Learn Free has some excellent resources. So I just think programs have been very creative, probably certainly the community-based sector, probably all sectors, as we adapted to this pandemic and teaching each other and mentoring each other. And then where volunteers are also used to supplement, and obviously that wasn't the same model during the pandemic, but one program was telling me that they've really changed their volunteer job description for the future going forward. And that was where before digital literacy skills was an asset, maybe. Now it was a must-have. This is one program, it's not everybody, but how even that is starting to change depending on what the role of the volunteer. But just some different approaches for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a whole other dimension, really, when you think about it. If you have a program that has 50 volunteers, the extent to which you may need to equip them, or if they even want to be equipped. I see a comment from Kathy in the chat that online teaching is a struggle for most of my volunteers. A lot of them aren't tech savvy and are reluctant to try. So, the good news for those volunteers will be that soon they'll be able to return, fingers crossed, to face-to-face. But, is there a whole other, like, modifying job descriptions and sort of advertisements and so on? I mean, it's not a bad idea by any stretch, but it's more work, it's more thinking, it's more sort of matching, preparing, and training and all that good stuff. So thanks, Joe. Okay. Oh. All right. So I think we have another poll that we're going to do now. So the question is, during the pandemic, did you serve learners who would historically be considered outside of your catchment area? And if so, well, that's not part of the poll. We just wanted to know, Sarah, if you could launch, oh, there it is. So what percentage of learners did you serve during the pandemic that were outside of your historic catchment area? Because when something's online, like, you could be a learner in Thunder Bay and I could be a teacher in London. Distance is no longer obviously a barrier. Okay, so we're at 10, 12, getting there. We have 15 people who have voted. I think there might be room for a few more. Okay, and Jackie says, oh, Jackie, you're brand new, I believe, so understandable. Okay. So 10 of the programs didn't go outside of their catchment area at all. 3 said less than 5%, less than 10, and 1 respondent said more than 25%. So certainly this kind of, compares to what I have heard locally. I do know that there were some programs, very, very specialized programs, like our CNIB program, for example, working with learners who are deaf and blind. I mean, moving online with that client group had a lot of intricacies involved. So I think it was more a matter there of once somebody had figured out how to do it, then they were happy to share it with learners across the province. So, Shannon.
Hi. So recently, very recently this week, we've had an offer from our school board program, not our school board LBS program, but from the school board adult education program to suggest that they would put on their Facebook, or no, not on the Facebook, on their website, so that all of their learners from across the province could see, to have a post that would indicate that they can contact our agency if they need support for credit. So we're designing something to go, because of course we're going to take whatever opportunity we can to reach out, that would say about assessment and upgrading, and as well as support with credit. And they do provide courses across the province. So our thought was that anybody that's outside of our area, we would just refer to their local LBS agency. That's kind of how we were hoping to handle it, because we do have limited capacity.
Yeah, and I think that's
very interested in how other people are handling that.
Well, why don't we, has anybody else had that experience and can offer any insight to Shannon? I mean, it sounds to me as though what you're proposing, Shannon, is very reasonable. I just hope that you don't spend a lot of time fielding referrals that you then have to move on to other parts of the province. I mean, when we think about capacity, I don't know. There have been lots of times in my career, though, where I've worried about LBS being overrun with requests, and it hasn't necessarily happened. So,
yeah, and that's something that we've discussed, and so now is actually a relatively good time for us, because we have summer students for the summer, so that will give us a little extra capacity, and then we can see, and if we do find we are inundated with it, then maybe we can look at taking it down, or just putting it up for some strategic, a couple weeks here and a couple weeks there kind of thing, rather than all the time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it does sound like quite an opportunity. So excellent. Okay. So the flip of that is also possible. So, what do you think the impact will be to your program if other programs, larger programs, offer remote service to learners who live outside of their catchment area? Has anybody had that experience where, you're thinking, wow, that would normally be somebody who would have come to my program, and now, because online learning doesn't have the same boundaries, has anybody had a negative effect like that? Negative impact? It's good if you haven't. Shannon?
I wouldn't say we've experienced that, but it's something that I've considered in terms of how do we manage that, because I wouldn't like to see I'd like to see there be some possibility for managing that in the same way that e-channel courses are able to have our LBS learners enrolled in their program and we both count them. I mean, I don't see how it's any different if we would have someone from another program participate in a program that we were offering, but still maintain registration and be providing, you know, alternative support at the program locally.
So blended learning, if I'm hearing you properly, Shannon, sort of takes on a slightly different connotation, where before it's always been, you know, between an e-channel provider and a face-to-face deliverer sharing the learner, possibly sharing a learner between two LBS agencies who are offering different things online. Yeah, it'd be interesting. I don't have to deal with CAMs, but I wonder, so that probably would work the same way. It's like a supplementary service. Wendy, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I just, I think that is a concern for small community-based agencies. But I would hope that we could work together and build new partnerships to support each other's programmings, because that really is what's best for the learners. So I just, but it is a concern. It's something we think of here.
Yeah, and so I mean, literacy service planning in theory should be a place where these kinds of things are discussed. I know sometimes it can be hard to put them on the agenda depending on what people's intentions are and personalities and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think we're entering a new era of collaboration opportunities. And, you know, just the same way that you wouldn't want every program in an area offering digital literacy training at the same time, like as a standalone program, it's that extra layer of coordination that's required to make sure that, you know, really the people in that community are getting the very best range of opportunities that they can get.
We actually very recently ran into this issue, and it hasn't so much directly affected our day-to-day learners, but we were gearing up to offer kind of a one-off program called Build Your Skills, with a focus on kind of pre-apprenticeship prep. And shortly after we were gearing up to offer it for the first time, Fanshawe rolled out an initiative along with some other government partners that we were completely unaware of. And it's extremely similar to the program that we just spent a year putting together. And I'll be the first to admit that their program is superior because they're offering features that we simply wouldn't have the funding to offer. So I don't think anybody was at fault. We weren't aware of that program. I'm not so sure they were aware of ours, but it definitely illustrates the need for us to figure out how to better communicate different initiatives that we're coming up with so that we're not stepping on each other's toes.
Yeah, I know the program that you're speaking of, Nicole, and the new program, I guess that would be just which Goliath. You know, that's a Skills Advance Ontario project.
Yes.
So yeah, extremely well funded. They're becoming more and more numerous all the time, and that's just another piece that every agency is trying to contend with, right? Because you don't always see them until they're on your doorstep. Right. And then trying to figure out how they're going to impact. What I'd love to see is for the WISE program to be a feeder program. You know, and I wonder if there's an opportunity to kind of work along those lines for LBS to provide support for like a week up front, help people kind of whet their appetite. We're then moving into the future cohorts of the Skills Advance Ontario program. But we can talk about that.
Yeah. And I think that's what Shelley is working to maybe work towards in the fall.
Awesome. Sorry, here's my assistant. She's okay. Shannon, do you have your hand up, or is that from last time? I can't tell.
Yeah, no, I have it up again. I also this week, to preface it, we've been working on a pre-PSW program with a local school board that offers a PSW certificate program. Mm-hmm. And I had a call this week from a partner who was asking about that and what the content was like, so that if they could develop their own program, because they're a ways away and whatever. And I was like, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just ask us for ours? And you know, like, why would you spend the time doing that? She said, well, I didn't want to presume to ask. And I just was like, oh my goodness. First of all, if we're offering it and we have space available, we'll let you know so that you can refer your clients to the program. And second of all, we would share it with you, because why would you do that? Just doesn't make any sense. So I think that's one of the real strengths that I've seen in community-based literacy and basic skills, is that our willingness to share our material with our partners and our colleagues across the province, because we are all so stretched that it doesn't make any sense to have 17 of us developing the same thing. You know, everybody has their own take on things. You just take what someone else has already done and you tweak it to fit what you were looking for. Why would you start from scratch again? It doesn't make any sense.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more that LBS has a very strong history of sharing material. Nobody has enough time to develop in the first place, so if you can borrow something, at least a solid shell from somebody else, or even the whole thing, you know, it saves so much time. So, okay, I'm gonna keep us moving on here. So, you know, we've talked about cost, benefit, sort of risk, all that kind of stuff in various ways today, but wondering, you know, do you think that you've been able to fully determine the cost, the benefits, and potential risks of investing more in remote delivery, or maintaining your during pandemic levels of remote delivery while returning to face-to-face? Do you feel like you've got it all figured out and you've looked at every angle that you need to look at, or would there be Wendy, you're shaking your head. You're the only person I can actually see, so that's why I'm sort of picking on you. But we really do want to get a sense of how prepared are the community-based programs, and all programs are, because I'd be thinking, what if my ETC came to me and said, all right, explain why, provide your rationale, because they love that kind of thing. So I would want to have a plan in place that was reasonably well thought out and comprehensive for the size of organization they are.
Yeah. I think I don't, for us, we're small, community-based, we're sole service provider. There's so many what if scenarios right now for me. What if more and more people take remote learning? We have invested in more digital stuff and more technology, and that's going to require maintenance. If we happen to go into another lockdown, I think we're, 60-70% prepared. But again, it comes back to our services planning. We do a few what if scenarios. If we do invest in just one way, then you're putting all your eggs in one basket. And I don't think that's a good practice. I think, again, it comes back to knowing your agency's capacity and knowing your community and working in your services plan to figure that out. Technology is expensive and maintenance of it is expensive. And we're all great at sharing, and there's been awesome online training for our practitioners this past year and a half, but it still costs money. So again, if whatever works for your agency, but there's no way that I could even think of everything I would need to. I was part of a pandemic planning manual that was just released a few weeks back. And it's a great tool to share for especially community-based that would help us go through those decision-making processes. But I don't feel that I've been able to fully ascertain the big picture. So.
Thank you for your honesty, and I'm certain that you are not alone. Shannon has put in the chat, nope, we need more tools and information. And Angela says, we don't know how we can do it with our current level of staffing. So I think there are a lot of what ifs and things that are up in the air. I've heard a lot about scenario planning, recently. Like I think since the pandemic, it's become a pretty popular term. And I wonder if there's something that we could do along those lines. I think what I'm envisioning is possibly developing a template. And thank you, Wendy, for participating in the pandemic planning manual preparation. That's a lot of P's, bit alliteration on a Friday. That was something that our organization actually led, Literacy Link South Central. And it was with that kind of idea that who has the time, right? I mean, you're just head down trying to serve learners, and then there's all these other things that you're trying to take into consideration. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm wondering, does anybody else have anything that you'd like to share? Because heaven forbid, if you are fully prepared, maybe you could share some of the things that you've taken into consideration.
Mayor, there's a good comment in the chat from Courtney Brown. I feel there may be unrealistic expectation by the ministry that remote or online learning is more cost effective. And in the end, in-person programs need flexibility to integrate both models based on their community needs. As many have said, more staff are needed to have more one-to-one interventions. I can only speak on behalf of my agreement, classroom delivery versus e-channel. The funding model is not consistent across both programs.
Okay, that is interesting. And I wonder if it's not putting you on the spot, our e-channel friends, maybe you could share some of the things that you take into account when you're doing your planning on an annual basis, since you do all deliver exclusively online. I just think it'd be a good opportunity to do some brainstorming, because maybe with 1.5 years, 1 year under their belt, like maybe a lot of programs, you know, there are angles that they haven't necessarily looked at yet.
Hi, Tamara. It's Courtney here. When we plan out our year, we do it in the same method that we do with our classroom delivery. We know up front what our agreement says, how many learners we're supposed to serve, how much money we have to do it. And there isn't a lot of change year over year with the budgets. We're just really reflecting right now with some of the online learners that we support, whether they're blended or fully remote. And we are finding that a lot of students are just needing more help. They need more access to, whether that's even just conversations, video chats. They need more than just, email communication. And our classroom program has shifted to doing a lot of one-to-one meetings online, and that is working for a lot of people, but it does take time, and that's already been covered. So to think that classroom programs can just pivot and, serve the same amount of people and do as good of a job online with the resources they have just doesn't make sense. And, I like I said, I can only speak to our agreements, the funding model, and Barb has echoed me in the comments. It's just not consistent. They're funded very differently. And yeah, it's really, really tough. So, we find that with each channel, it's like, okay, these are the clients we need to serve. This is how we're going to plan to do it. But a lot can change throughout the year that impacts that. And in the last 2 years, we saw a lot of things around, lots of people wanting to do online learning and then realizing very quickly maybe it wasn't the right method for them. And then that didn't work out with us. So we may have got some numbers, but things may not have worked out in the end. So that's a tough question to answer. I'm not sure if any of the other partners have anything to add.
I don't know if, I think I've seen Barb get bumped off once, so I don't know if she's able to comment directly. Linda,
yeah,
right?
I can. I'm back here, Tamara, now.
Okay.
So yes, I certainly agree with Courtney's comment in the chat in terms of the ministry having a probably somewhat unrealistic expectation of the costs involved in true quality online e-learning delivery, which again is different from emergency remote delivery, which you clarified at the beginning, Tamara. I can, quantify it a little bit to say in the Anglophone stream, the cost per learner funding that we get for each channel is about half of what an Anglophone face-to-face program would get. Or you could flip that around and say the targets are twice as big for the same number, for the same cost. So I think that some of the things, to go back, if I heard your original question correctly, Tamara, were some of the considerations that we face ongoing in each channel are some that have been touched on today. So for example, the cost of the technology, you know, the not just learning platforms, but hardware to run them, the tech support. I mean, if you're running asynchronous, you need to consider how are you going to have 24/7, 365 tech support if you want to go down that route. Even if it's synchronous, you still need good tech support behind your technology. And if you actually want to do, you know, course design, instructional design is a huge cost. Again, part of the difference between e-learning, sort of true online learning versus emergency remote learning. And sometimes you need different technology providers than you would normally have. And certainly I think Courtney touched on this too, the amount of time it takes to interact with people and provide information is different, really different online. So that's a consideration that the e-channel programs are always looking at. What's the best way to communicate? How can we do it in different ways? You know, how can we use our websites? How can we use email? How can we use phone if we need to? How can we use messaging? So it's a different communications approach as well. If you're really considering going down the road of more remote delivery. So yeah, that's my 2 cents for now, Tamara.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, the reality is we do have e-channel. So I think part of the new world is going to be determining, you know, how do we all work effectively with one another? And as always, and this is something that I think all of our LBS programs are just so good at, is putting the client first, right? That's the number one piece. We all have, you know, targets to meet and things like that, but really trying to figure out, you know, I always think if I were running an agency, and really I probably should with all the time I spend thinking about how I would do it. You know, I think about like, what would I want to be planning for? How would I be thinking about using resources, and absolutely considering the current landscape that exists? A little, you know, kind of wondering about what the ministry's expectations might be moving forward. I haven't heard anything about, you know, them suggesting what programs should be doing with regard to online delivery, but I guess we'll keep our ears open. Okay, I'm just seeing Sarah has contributed in the chat a couple of things. Heather, maybe you can fill us in on the chat conversation, please.
Sure. Sorry, there's just a lot of back and forth supporting the comments that are being made orally, and a lot of comments about determining how we are all going to work together and effectively. So I'm just going to jump in here with a comment from Linda Wright. On top of that, the constant changing of technology and the time put in to troubleshoot these, stay up to date and adapt to them. It takes away from learner contact, especially when a site might be low staffed. I do like how practitioners have embraced technology and are so much more comfortable in orientating their clients to the online world. And Sarah Stocker said, seeing your whole ecosystem and deciding upon all the best resources and fitting them together is not a simple process. So Joanne Cottery, yes, client first, what do they need in 2021? I'm just going to scroll back to see if I missed anything. Just that we need to put a lot of thought and consideration in how we offer services and work together. Online learning is not very effective for our very low level learners. They need the face-to-face support. Yeah.
Excellent.
That
Okay.
catches us up.
Thanks very much. All right, so we have our third and I think final poll, which is, have you developed an official plan, however brief, it could be on the back of a napkin, that's okay, for the coming year related to your organization's role and targets and remote delivery? Kind of want to play the Jeopardy theme song as I wait for people to do the poll. Okay, so it looks like for those folks who have responded, 5 people say they have. Well, here's the $1 million question. I would love to see if you're able and willing to share what you put in your plan, because I think most programs have not developed a plan, and what perhaps our committee could do, like I said earlier, is put together some kind of a template to help walk people through, like, what are the areas to address? What kinds of scenarios are most typical? Like that kind of thing. And trust me, I don't have any intentions of writing a book. I don't think that's a realistic thing to ask of any LBS agency, right? But for those who did say yes, if you'd be willing to share, I'm going to put my email. And I would never even identify, where it came from. I just would want to start seeing some of those plans, because you may address an area that I haven't even considered. Heather?
Yeah, sorry, just the first thing that popped into my mind, because I know there are more than just community-based organizations on this discussion, is I'm wondering if the ones that have already developed an official plan or have made strides toward that, are they community-based organizations, or are they from large, like school-based or school board and college organizations that have more of a organizational structure in place that would inform that process, that it wouldn't be up to the ground level practitioners to do it?
It's a great question. I'm not sure how we can necessarily get at that unless people feel comfortable sharing. So if you did say that you've developed an official plan, are you a larger organization or are you a community-based agency? And people may not feel comfortable. It could have been our e-channel providers who responded to that. I don't know.
Yeah, Tamara, it's Courtney here. I was one of the respondents that said yes. And I have to admit, I'm more of the back of a napkin contributor here. But, really for us, it's advocating that we need to get back into our classrooms. And I'm speaking on behalf of our in-person delivery. We have seen the disengagement, the desire, as was touched on earlier, for, online learning, I want to do it virtually, great. And then I can just speak to one of our locations who tried to book appointments this week because we were able to get back into the classroom now that stage 1 is in place, very limited. And oh no, sorry, that doesn't work for me. So, I think we really need some consistency, and we really need to get back into our physical classrooms, even if it is on a very limited basis, but something that's consistent that students can commit to and stick with. And I know there's all kinds of variables with childcare and all of those things. But I really do fear that if we go on another yo-yo this year with, closed, open, it's going to hit hard when it comes down to the bottom line, and you can't blame the clients for that. You can't put all that on them. It comes down to having a plan, or at least a loose plan that you can work with. And I think the bigger agencies have more departments or policies and procedures to draw on in that case.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Courtney. Okay. I know we're getting close to the end of our time, but we're also getting close to the end of this presentation. So here's the question. Are there any supports that our committee could provide that would assist you in making planned decisions about your organization's role in remote delivery versus going online in an emergency? And that's the quest that we're on. This conversation has been excellent in terms of helping to fill in some of my gaps. I need to understand where programs are coming from to have any hope of determining what might actually assist them. But it's really even better than me trying to interpret is for you to perhaps say what it is that would be helpful for you. Can you think of any supports that would help you?
I think the biggest thing that we would benefit from is online content. Outside of the time we invest on one-on-one support with our learners, the amount of time it takes us to come up with a math lesson, a reading lesson, a novel study, it's extremely time consuming. It's gotten better now that that learning curve has sort of started and we're familiar with different platforms, like Pear Deck. So I'm a bit more efficient at it now than I was in September, but it just takes a lot of time, right? And if you're online 8 hours a day with 8 different clients for 1-hour sessions, when are you finding time to develop that content you need? And within our programs, it's frequent that all 8 of those individuals are on very different levels. So it's not often I can even use that, that lesson I put together for more than one individual at that particular time. So just quality online content would be a huge support.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Shannon.
So the thing that strikes me is, would it be possible for the networks, and I know that CLO and LLO are developing and continue to develop somebody's going to have to help me with the online resource.
Oh, the digital resource collection. Yeah,
has been developed. Yeah. Whatever. Is there a way? And I know that takes a lot of work and stuff, but is there a way that like the networks could just start a listing that people could submit? We've created a lesson on this, and if people are interested in contacting us for it, then here's who they touch base with, those kinds of things. So it's just really just a listing, and the agencies themselves are still doing the work, but it's just a list of places that have already done things, because I can't stress enough how strongly I feel about why are we all doing the same thing all the time when we could just be sharing.
Yeah, that would certainly be much more efficient. Thanks, Shannon. Wendy.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that I think with we're talking about planning, whether it's short-term or long-term, and I think that these discussions should be with our board of directors, so I think that networks could maybe help, like us smaller guys, with maybe taking a look at some strat planning or long-term planning because all of our boards of directors are volunteers. So I thought maybe that might be a way that we could get some support and help our boards of directors understand too what Lit LBS is going through.
I really like that idea, Wendy, because it's true. You don't make these decisions in isolation, and sometimes trying to bring your board up to speed on the nuances and the realities when they're busy and they're volunteering their time. Yeah, I hear what you're saying there. Thank you. That's a good suggestion. Anything else that people want to share or ask? I think Shannon and Wendy, your hands are still up. It's funny, they don't go down automatically. Whereas if you're clapping or something, it does change. So Shannon, I think you re-raised your hand.
No, I was trying to lower it. Sorry.
Okay, at this point, I'm going to ask our my fellow committee members, so Sarah, Heather, and Barb, do you have any final questions for the group? Anything you want to clarify based on what's been said?
Questions. I would just offer one comment around the online content, and that is just that, remember that you can refer a learner to an e-channel program and share that learner, where the learner's doing something with you and also engaging with some e-channel content, and then both the e-channel program and your program get to count the learner toward your targets. So even if that's just a stopgap measure while you're trying to get online content developed yourself or shared with somebody else, just a suggestion that shared learner piece is something that I would say all the e-channel programs have probably worked even harder to accommodate during the pandemic for lots of different reasons. So I think that's just wanted to throw that point in there, Tamara.
Great, thank you. And I see a comment from Nicole in the chat. I love working with the Learning Hub for my learners who are willing and interested. I've always had a great experience working together with them. So, again, e-channel is part of the landscape, so it makes sense to maximize that wherever possible. Wendy, I think your hand is up.
Tamara, I just wanted to share that one of the things that we have been doing here for a while now is when we're reaching out with our learners who are registered or possible clients, and we have a little poll on it's going to go up on our little Facebook page, and asking learners what they would prefer. When we do assessment at LBS, we assess what their learning preference is and what their goal is, and we're asking now, what do you prefer, face-to-face, online, virtual? And I've been compiling those stats, and I think that is really going to help me in deciding what kind of programming I'm going to offer to that target group. And I was thinking that might be another thing that maybe the networks might be able to help us with, I guess, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So it sounded to me like you were saying you've begun asking clients upon intake, what their preferences are, right? And then you kind of build out from that to think about what kind of programming you're going to be using. So in terms of the networks helping, is it maybe honing in a little bit more on that preferences piece, or what could we do that would support you, Wendy?
Well, I was just thinking if we could get that survey out there to more learners, not just learners that are registered, not just just ask what do they want? What would they prefer?
I really like the client-centeredness of that. And not to ramble here, but we have a practitioner in our networking area who has done so much work around universal design. And she's been talking to me about personas. Honestly, she stretches my brain weekly with her amazing ideas. And I feel like some of what she's been sharing with me, Wendy, is congruent with what you are talking about and looking for. So if you don't mind, I'd love to follow up with you one-on-one. I put my email in the chat, but if you wouldn't mind putting yours in there, that would be awesome, or just telling me what it is, because I want to make sure that I'm on the right page.
Okay, I will.
Okay,
thank you.
And I see
Tamara, I just have a comment with Heather. I just want to, based on the discussions and everything, I just want to comment that literacy and basic skills has always, all the programs, networks, everybody, it's always been so very important that the learner comes first. And a lot of programs work together to do that, sharing resources or looking out for the learner's best interest. So I just want to say at this point that, yes, we have e-channel, and yes, we have classroom programs, and we have now this emergency virtual response that the province has been doing this past year. But I think what we need to remember is that the learner still always comes first. It's not about this program or that program or e-channel versus classroom. We're all really working for the good of the learner. And there's so many opportunities for us to collaborate together. And I think you will find, I was in e-channel previously, so I do know that e-channel providers are very interested in working with classroom programs to provide the best training for learners. They may refer to that program, or learners who may be in both programs, to come up with a learning plan that works best for the learner, whether it uses classroom resources or it uses virtual resources. So I think people need to remember that as literacy providers, that not to think as the other guy as competition, but to think of them in terms of a partner that you can talk to and you can work with to develop, a learning plan that may include both programs and works best for your learner. So just a comment.
I appreciate that, Heather. Yeah, I mean, we're very fortunate to have some of the supports that we have in our field. Sorry, cat sale just went by again. Yeah, and I think that now more than ever, we need to be working together, right? I mean, there's so many things that are changing around us, whether it's service system managers or, like everything seems to be moving at the same time. So I definitely think we need to draw upon each other's strengths as much as we possibly can. Okay, well, in that case, since it's 11 o'clock on the dot, I almost think I planned it. So I just want to tell everybody how much I appreciate your joining today. And if I were you and you were talking to your ETC, I mean, the fact that you sat in for an hour and a half and worked through and heard from other people and shared, you've already started your planning, right? I mean, now things are percolating, and hopefully the committee and we have some good ideas about how we might continue to support you on this journey to try to figure out how to take something that happened as part of an emergency response and more thoughtfully, now that we have a little bit more time to breathe, think about what it's going to mean for you, for adult learners. And the thing I've heard repeatedly today, which has caused me to change how I'm thinking, is I typically think systems and how that goes down to impact clients. But what I heard today is start with clients and think about how that needs to affect the system. So I really appreciate that. I don't mind changing my thinking pattern. I feel like I've learned a lot today. So just want to say thanks everyone for joining us. And I hope you have a wonderful, if not slightly wet, Friday. So, all right, take care.
Thanks so much.